addicted to reason. Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion has gotta go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is Sunday, June 13th, 2010. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Jeff D.
Hi, Matt.
How you been?
Good. You?
I've been pretty good. We are a live public access television program sponsored by the atheist community of Austin. The ACA is a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. For more information about the ACA, you can visit the website www.atheist-community.org. There you can find our frequently asked questions page about who are we, what do we believe, what don't we believe, why don't we believe it, etc. You can also find information about our various events, including the Atheist Happy Hour, which is every Thursday at the Dog and Duck Pub beginning at around 7 o'clock. And I'm doing these announcements in just whatever order I feel like. So they'll scramble for the right screens. And the ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Burton Springs Road beginning at around 11 o'clock, or 11:30 actually. See, 11:30. Except for the first Sunday of the month, when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Next month's lecture is it Amy Parsons next month? Yes. Yeah, Amy Parsons from Camp Quest, Texas will be down to talk to us then. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. And after this program's over, we get together for dinner at Threadgill's at 301 West Riverside Drive. See, I can say it before they can even get it up on the screen. We're on the air till about 6 o'clock. We'll be down at dinner around 6:30 or so. That is also open to the public, unless you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, in which case, please piss off. I'm kidding. Just don't come down and cause trouble. Anybody else who wants to come down and actually have a decent conversation or have some dinner, you're all welcome to do that. There's no membership requirements for that either. There's upcoming events in addition to our regularly scheduled events, and I need to start pushing it more. And one is our yearly Bat Cruise. For those who don't know, Austin, Texas has the largest metropolitan bat population, I think, on the planet, if not at least in the country. And every September we get together, we rent a boat down at the lake and go out, take some food, snacks, drinks, whatever, have a good time, and then watch the bats come out at night. This year, we're planning on starting it off with an afternoon lecture, which we're still finalizing the details for. Although right now the plan is for me to update and amplify my Superiority of Secular Morality lecture, which we'll use as kind of the kickoff to the Bat Cruise event. And also, after the Bat Cruise is over, there are a number of us every year who get together and go to the 10 o'clock show at Esther's Follies on 6th Street. That's not being organized by the ACA. It's just too much hassle to try and figure out who wants to go and who doesn't, and get tickets, and should we, try to book the whole venue, etc. So I'll give it more reminders as we get closer to it. But for the people who want to go to this musical comedy magic extravaganza, I guess, you can go online. We'll have a link on our website to the Esther's Follies website, and you can look into possibly getting your tickets and joining us there afterwards. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about the show. That's PHETS. It's currently on hiatus until probably early to mid-August. There's a lot going on, schedule conflicts. I'm getting ready to move, which means Dillahunty International Studios will move. And then as soon as we're set back up, we'll get back to regular shows with the nonprofits as well. That is all of the announcements that I have.
That was awesome. You have done this before, haven't you?
Once or twice. I wouldn't say that was awesome, though.
It was awesome.
Cool.
You didn't have to. I said it was awesome.
Awesome. Jeff thinks it was awesome. It's
Hey,
a live
everybody.
call-in show,
Yeah.
which I didn't mention that if you don't get through on the telephone today, see, this is how unawesome
You
it
made a
was.
mistake.
If you don't get through on the telephone today or you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes. Obviously, we get so much email, we cannot possibly answer all of it, but we do our best to answer a good chunk of it. They'll have the number up for you like almost right away, and you can call in and have a discussion, tell us what you believe, why you believe it, or whatever strikes your fancy. But I'm turning it over to Jeff.
You are?
I am. You are
All right.
on,
Well,
sir.
I have just a small thing to talk about. Islam has gotten beat up a little bit in recent weeks.
Yeah.
There are a number of events that they didn't care for too much. Starting with Boobquake, and this actually made the cable news. A Muslim cleric, I'm not going to try to pronounce that name, Siddiqui was his last name, quoted as saying by the Iranian media, quote, "Many women who do not dress modestly lead young men astray, corrupt their chastity, and spread adultery in society, which consequently increases earthquakes." And being the rational, science-minded folk that we are, one of us unbelievers decided to put that to the test, and she organized on Facebook this event called Boobquake, which simply consisted of, on a particular day, young ladies were encouraged to dress immodestly, which does not mean nakedness, but a little cleavage. It varied.
Immodest from this Muslim's view is anything short of a burqa. So
Correct.
Yeah.
In order to see if giant earthquakes could be caused, and the answer was no. So that was amusing. I couldn't participate in that one myself personally, but I did jump on board the next event targeting Islam, which was Everybody Draw Mohammad Day. As we all know, is it all? I don't know.
It is some.
Some Muslims have an issue with depictions of their prophet Muhammad, and some of them take this so far as to kill cartoonists and attempt to kill other cartoonists who have produced such images. And somebody had the brilliant idea of, there's only so many of us that can kill at once. So Everybody Draw Muhammad Day was on a particular day. Members of this Facebook group were encouraged to generate their own drawn images of the Prophet Muhammad. And here's mine. This was posted on Facebook. I didn't warn the guys in the control room, but there he is. This is actually inspired by actual medieval paintings of Muhammad as he is depicted in those paintings. I quite enjoyed drawing the turban. That was an interesting arrangement of lines. The fire on his head is not me trying to make some kind of statement. That's apparently in medieval Islam imagery from some cultures that's sort of analogous to a halo.
Yeah, kind of a holy fire.
Yeah, it's right. It's an indication of his holiness and bare feet. Again, not making any kind of Beatles message or anything, but simply that's the way he's depicted. And if you're curious, if you're surprised that I'm saying that's the way he was depicted, that's because this idea that you shouldn't draw Muhammad does not date back to the founding of the religion. In fact, there's a lot of historical images of Muhammad. Now, some of them have been later defaced, so you just see this sort of white blob of whatever the substance was that the painting was made on, sometimes surrounded by the halo of fire. But a lot of other instances are detailed drawings of there's the guy in his robe with his turban and and his flamey head and the whole 9 yards. If you're curious, you can see a collection of such images at tinyurl.com/DND73. There's a whole collection.
Does that stand for do not draw?
It was random. That's the Mohammad image archive at zombietime.com. But again, that tiny URL is tinyurl.com/DND73. So now, as you can see, my Mohammad was just attempting to recreate the historical depiction of the guy from as he was shown in the past.
Which is what I did.
Didn't go out of my way to show him with an arrow through his head, or somebody doing this behind him, or I'm not making any fun of him. Though a lot of people did take it that way, because a lot of people are really upset about this, and I think I completely understand that. The only reason I didn't go that far is I didn't think it was necessary. Because the reason people are upset is not that, it's not just that there have been people killed over this, because you can argue that that's extremists that are taking it that far. But the very idea that any group can have an internal rule about what is proper, and then externalize and say, we are offended if anybody else not in our group breaks that rule, is just not appropriate. And so, I only wanted to take it as far as, let's do an image. You can't possibly complain that this is disrespectful, and see what happens. Well, I saw what happened. The most interesting result was after Everybody Draw Mohammad Day, I got onto another group called Everybody Draw Mohammad Again Day. And by the way, Everybody Draw Mohammad Month is still ongoing. These are all Facebook groups. And there was a fellow who is a Muslim and joined Everybody Draw Mohammad Again Day, and was basically saying to his fellow Muslims, let's not take this too seriously. These unbelievers are just trying to get our goat. Not true. They have the right to do what they want, but Allah will deal with them after they're dead. And that's where I got into a discussion with him. I'm saying, what do you mean when you say we have a right to draw whatever we want, but Allah will, pass judgment on us afterward? Isn't a right something that you don't get judgment passed on you afterwards? Isn't punishing somebody for exercising their rights fundamentally wrong? That went back and forth several times until he finally stopped responding to me. And that's the problem. It doesn't have to go as far as killing people. The fundamental problem here is this idea that not only do rules of behavior come from a God, but that they come from this particular group's God. And since the group believes that, they believe they're in a position to tell all the rest of us what we may or may not do. We're talking about drawing pictures here, You could change this to anything. You could say, with my new religion, we're offended by people who wear straw hats. So you mustn't be wearing straw hats. Well, I can't make up a group. I can make up a group and say, we're not going to wear any straw hats. That's perfectly okay. People want to join my group voluntarily and not wear the straw hat, no problem. But as soon as my group turns around and says, nobody else may either, or you offend us, and, you're wearing that straw hat, you must be doing it to anger me, that's over the line.
And some go beyond that. It's not just a matter that you've offended us. You've offended us to the point where we will then enact revenge upon you.
And we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But for me, it's not, this is, you don't even have to take it that far.
Right.
It doesn't have to be taken that far before it's an issue, right? So there we go. That was Everybody Draw Mohammed Day.
Yeah.
And it's ongoing. There are waves of Mohammed drawings coming out, and it's interesting to see that that Islam can do pretty much nothing about it. And it has been said that one of the reasons that Islam has been so problematic lately is that it never underwent a reformation and never, was forced to kind of rein itself back in and get a little more civilized. And I am of the opinion that that's the goal of these kinds of things, of Boobquake and Everybody Draw Mohammed Day, is to simply forcefully remind, though not violently, forcefully remind Muslims that they don't have any special rights. And I wouldn't. I will refrain from doing anything that would obviously insult anybody. But you make up special rules for your religion, those are rules for your religion. They're not rules for me. You can't expect me to live by them. You remember the cracker? Mm-hmm. Right? The communion wafer incident?
Yes.
Same thing. That's the Catholic Church. Same thing.
Yep.
Catholic Church says the communion wafer is a special little object that has to be treated a certain way. But if you're a non-believer, to expect a non-believer to have to treat it that way is just wrong. Just wrong.
Which is why I ate them with queso.
Did you? See, I didn't participate in. I didn't know really where to find one and wasn't willing to go to the trouble. But
well, I had a minor go around at the blog for the Austin American Statesman Religion Reporter on the subject.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, and she had basically written off this Draw Muhammad Day as some kind of childish action by bigots that were out to vilify and demean Muslims. And I pointed out that it was abominable to hear that from a reporter, that they couldn't see the free speech element of this, that this wasn't just, we're going to stick it to Muslims Day. It was a legitimate action, and that in this particular scenario, it was because Muslims had already demeaned themselves and turned themselves into Islam. Some Muslims anyway, not all of them, but they had overreacted. And that if there was any similar overreaction by any other religion to anything else that was comparable to this, a similar thing would take place. We've got our little buddy Christ. I wish we had a buddy Muhammad to go with him.
You could just say it's a buddy Muhammad. Who would know?
Everybody who's seen Dogma.
Okay.
But apart from that, we got Muhammad, our sacred cow, and FSM watching over all of them. So, anyway, you want to go ahead and start taking calls?
I'm ready for calls. Sure.
Okay, so we've got one call at least waiting. I know there's others that are getting ready to queue up. The number's on the screen. As a reminder, if you don't get through today or you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org, and we'll do what we can to get you an answer. But we've got, is it Stephan?
Yes, it is. Yes.
From New York. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Not bad.
Okay. Well, as I pointed out, I'm a theist, and the argument has been presented that Christians have no proof for their position, and the atheist, he has evolution and the evidence to present it. And my question is, have we as human beings witnessed our own birth? And the question is that we really and truly accept that the person who's our mother, we accept it by faith, really and truly, because, you really didn't see it unless, of course, it was videotaped. It's not until later someone who's probably adopted is then told later that this person was not your birth mother. So I'm saying that generally, even with the Big Bang, no one realistically saw it, so it can be done from a standpoint of faith, because it is really something that you believe in without having to see. And it's the same thing for theists as well.
Okay, there's about 6 things that are kind of wrong that I want to address, and I'll trade off, and I'm sure Jeff spotted all 6 of them as well. The first thing is that atheism and evolution are in no way tied together. My atheism is not dependent on an acceptance of evolution or anything else. It is entirely dependent on the theistic claims have not met their burden of proof. So that's number one. The other is that your example of having to take it on faith that your mother is your mother is not true. I mean, first of all, we can do DNA testing to verify that my mother is my mother. And that also applies to questions about Big Bang origins. The Big Bang cosmology is a scientific theory that made testable predictions. And then we went out and verified those predictions by observing the cosmic microwave background radiation, etc. This wasn't just a hunch that we're accepting on faith. It is the best explanation that is supported by evidence.
Okay, furthermore, there's a scientist called Dr. Robert Gentry. I don't know if you've heard of him.
How did we get to furthermore?
Because if I can understand your point of view from saying that, because I did present in my question an opposite point of view, that the person can know it if whatever it is, I guess, based on it being videotaped or, as you said, DNA testing.
So I'm confused, though, because you presented some things, I responded to them, and then without acknowledging whether you agreed with my response or not, you just said furthermore and wanted to move on.
Okay, I agree that, yes, with DNA testing, that, yes, the person can know that.
Okay.
But I agree from that point. I don't disagree. So that my not acknowledging maybe that I would have agreed with what you said. So
that's fine.
Okay. So that's what I said. Furthermore, I'm asking, have you heard of the scientist Dr. Robert Gentry?
That name's not familiar.
Okay, he's a theist scientist who, throughout the 70s and 80s, was able to look at the introduction of polonium halos and their ability to, or their responsibility for the existence of granite. And he was able to look at their half-life, which was about, I believe, 3.5 minutes.
Oh.
And it was extremely short. And in his publishings, it made scientists start to wonder if what he's saying is true, because for that to have such a short half-life is almost, as to say, instantaneous, which goes along with creation, and the Bible which says that when God spoke, things came into existence immediately. And, there has been very good evidence. He's gone through the different polonium halos, and many a times when he wrote to other journals, if there's freedom of speech, no one has to tell him that he can't write this or write that, because he's presented it and they've told him to revise it. And the only reason was that they had problems with it because it seemed to be endorsing and actually proving creation to be true. So I'm saying that, once again,
May I?
Yes.
If there's freedom of speech, freedom of the press, he should have been allowed to publish that without them having to tell him to revise it and put something different.
Hey, Stephan?
Yeah.
When did he come up with this? You said in the 70s?
Around the late 70s to the early 80s.
Okay, so...
He wrote a book called Creation's Tiny Mystery.
Okay, so that's 30... What am I? I'm having trouble doing the math in my head. 40 years ago?
Probably around 30
okay,
years
30 years ago. Yeah. And how much traction is that getting in the scientific community?
Right. It's been published for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
And there has been a push by creationists to be able to, based on this evidence and other evidence from...
No, but but hold on. The point of... what I'm asking is, tell me about all the other scientists who are reviewing his work and finding out that he is correct and that the scientific community is coming over to his way of thinking. Is that the case? Because
there have been some based on the judges who have reviewed his work, and there have been some who've actually said that he has some credibility.
Some is not how it works in science, right? There's a lot of scientists out there, and a guy comes up with a claim. Anybody can say anything. The question is, after 30 years, is this guy's claim making? Is it taking over the scientific worldview? Is it?
It's not taken over because the majority of the world doesn't believe in scientific evidence for creation.
So you're saying that there's this guy who has got a claim, he made it 30 years ago, and the only reason it hasn't been accepted by the rest of the scientific community is because they are prejudiced.
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, well,
If you actually go, for example, to talk origins, as I just did, because this was ringing a bell, not his name, but what you actually talked about, there's an extremely thorough debunking. It goes point by point to the fact that his model violates general relativity. His NRI model can reproduce observed features of the universe only by adjusting parameters in the model by hand. They list each of the actual flaws in these, and flaws for which evidently Gentry and his supporters don't have a response to. So I'm not an expert in this thing, and it doesn't really matter to me that some, as Jeff was pointing out, that some scientist has come up with a theory, for example, that some other scientists happen to agree with. I'm only going to accept something when the preponderance of evidence says so. When you claim that this is being refused because scientists have some conspiracy bias against something that would disconfirm creation, first of all, I don't believe that that's remotely true. But second of all, the reason that I don't think it's remotely true is that his theory does not confirm biblical creation or any other creation. It is just a different model of the universe. There is nothing that says, let's assume, for example, that his model was actually correct. You cannot draw a line from his model being correct to therefore what the Bible has to say about creation is necessarily correct, and therefore there is a God. Finding something that is consistent with a biblical creation account does not prove that that's what actually happened. And in this case, his model is wrong.
yeah. Now, and one more thing, Stephan. I mean, you can say that the only reason that that the scientific community has not accepted this guy's views is because they're all part of a conspiracy to not accept it. But you know what else you can say? You can say that the only reason that this guy and his supporters proposed their views in the first place is because they're part of a conspiracy to get their views accepted. Either side can play that game. Let's not play that game. Let's look at the evidence, and that's what scientists do. That's their job, is to look at the evidence and see if it supports a theory or not.
right. I mean, anthropology is a science as well, right?
Sure, and?
And many in anthropology have discovered things that have supported the Bible in terms of...
Are we off on yet another claim? We're still talking about what
Okay, we'll keep on
Jensen?
Gentry.
The point is, you cannot make your case by saying, I've got one lone scientist and a small group of believers who all say this one thing that isn't accepted by the scientific community, therefore that's evidence that my beliefs are true. That just doesn't wash.
Okay, I will not jump around for you, but
Okay.
the fact that, there are many, as I say, science, because, Gentry is just, one of the few that do support this claim. And, just as I was saying, as I asked you, if anthropology itself is a science, and in their digging, those physical anthropologists who go out there and dig up and discover things that do support it.
Such as?
You have anthropologists who dig, who make excavation digs.
Okay, let's cut to the chase.
Things that
let's cut to the. I'm sorry, Stephan, may I?
Yeah. Well,
so let's cut to the chase. What have they discovered? Have they discovered anything that's evidence that any supernatural events ever occurred?
Okay. There has been even fossils themselves of men who have been over the height suggested by evolutionists, because evolutionists have said that we have developed and grown up from a smaller form to being bigger than we are now, and there have been bones of a man who is tall.
Wow. There's individual variation even to people. Now, this is just assuming, without even looking at any of the references, this is just assuming that what you're saying is true. There's height variations among modern day humans now. The fact that you could, even if what you're saying is true, the existence of a fossil that is larger or smaller than expected is not proof of anything supernatural. Does this fossil have like attachments for wings or something?
No, it's just
what are you claiming that it is?
It's fully human. It's fully human, 12 feet tall.
Did it have? Okay, so you're saying it was 12 feet tall? What?
Yes.
12 feet tall? I think we'll have Matt. Matt's going to do the research on this.
I think you've been getting your information from very unreliable sources. I recall pictures of guys excavating giant skeletons, and those pictures have been demonstrated to be fakes.
What was the one in England, the famous one in England that was a statue?
Things like Ramaphosaurus and all those guys, haven't they proven to be fake too? And also the other
No.
quote-unquote missing links?
No. First, okay, wow. Hang on. Let me backtrack a second. First of all, your conspiracy theory thing falls apart the second you realize that atheism and evolution are not tied together, and that there are tons of Christians and other religionists who accept that evolution is a fact.
Oh yeah, and I had one more comment on that.
It is a fact. It is supported by evidence, and even one of the current head of the NIH, who is the former head of the Human Genome Project, has said that even if there were no fossils, the DNA evidence alone would be enough to confirm common ancestry. This is an evangelical Christian who I despise for all sorts of things, and yet he is unwilling to buy into this nonsense that you're buying into because the science does not support it. And now you're talking about digging up bones of 12-foot tall. What sort of conspiracy planet do we have to live on where the discovery by anthropologists of 12-foot humans?
It was done by evolutionist anthropologists, mind you.
Name them.
What world, kind of conspiracy world do we have to live in where the discovery of 12-foot human remains that disprove evolution, and I'm not saying that necessarily would, but you aren't front page news everywhere? What sort of world do we have to live in for that to be the case?
Yeah, the world gradually has to be better physically in terms of the air that we breathe, because the oxygen content has also gone down. So it cannot support bigger life forms because of the oxygen content. Because what I'm saying that this supports it, if someone who believes in the Bible, where Genesis 6 says that there were giants in the earth, you missed something very important a minute ago. And that is when I said that you can find things that are consistent with the Genesis account, yet they do not confirm it. In much the same way that anthropologists 1,000 years from now can dig up New York, but that doesn't confirm that there was a Spider-Man. So the fact that you might find bones of somebody doesn't mean that the biblical account of giants or Nephilim or anything else are accurate. And even if there were some grain of truth in there, none of that gets you back to the supernatural claims that are behind it. This is not the way reason is done. This is not the way a rational evaluation of evidence is. You don't begin with this and see how much evidence you can find that is consistent with it.
And speaking of which, that reminds me, this is something I've wanted to say since the beginning, where you said, Christians have their evidence and atheists have their evidence, and Matt has rightly pointed out that atheism and evolution are two different things, and that there are believers that accept the scientific findings of evolution. But not only that, atheists don't need evidence. There is one group that needs to meet the burden of proof, and that's those. Wow. There it is. I disappeared for a second.
I don't think that's the 12-foot one, because that looks like 40 feet.
And that is the group that postulates, that makes the initial claim. The initial claim is there's a God. Now, it doesn't matter what atheists say after that. It doesn't matter what evidence we do or do not come up with. The burden of proof is on the believers to show that their claim is true. And the reason we're atheists is not because we think we can prove that your God doesn't exist. It's because you folks haven't proved that he does. So all this stuff, I mean, wow, yeah, the things that you're bringing up are like crazy conspiracy theory, lunatic fringe, anti-evolution stuff.
It reminds me.
You really need to. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You really need to, check to see whether the sources you're getting this from are considered legitimate at all, other than by other believers like yourself who just desperately want this to be true.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like the Paluxy tracks, where somebody is convinced that they have found fossilized human and dinosaur tracks together, thereby, right there in concrete, we have proof that man and dinosaur lived and walked at the same time. And those tracks are simply not what the believers claim they are. And because they are, instead of following where the evidence leads, they are leading the evidence to the conclusion that they want to accept. It doesn't matter how many times scientists point out to these guys that no, that's not actually true. They're just not going to believe it. And so it lives on, especially on creationist sites on the internet. The first thing is, as much as I hate recommending creationist sites, if you go to, I believe it's Answers in Genesis, that has a list of arguments that they think creationists should not use, they're at least trying to eliminate some of the dumber arguments, like about moon dust and other things like that. I'd recommend that as a starting point. And then when you're done reading that, go to Talk Origins and read the other arguments. There's an index of creationist claims there, and it's everything from what you were talking about here to the giants. The information is available. I don't know for a second if it would convince you, because you're of a mindset that this evidence that confirms your beliefs is credible, and the scientists won't accept it because they have some sort of agenda to push. And that's not only is it wrong when you consider the fact that there are many believers who accept evolution, but it's also wrong from the standpoint of how science actually works. If in fact there was scientific evidence for the biblical account, every scientist would be all over that, because first of all, it's Nobel Prize material. You're going to be rich. You're going to have grants all over the place. That is a worldview altering or worldview confirming event. And to play it up as if there's some anti-creation science thing that has taken over the world and won't let the truth come out, it puts you in the tinfoil hat group.
So, I mean, what is the center of evolution anyway?
What do you mean?
The first thing I've heard of in evolution is the Big Bang Theory.
That's not part of evolution.
Can that be proven?
The Big Bang has nothing to do with evolution.
Evolution, the theory of evolution by natural selection begins after life formed. It has nothing to do with universal origins, and it is only loosely tied to abiogenesis in the fact that we need some explanation for how life formed in the first place. Evolution deals with how creatures evolve over time.
Okay. And I will admit to you that I have not even really scratched the surface of studying evolution. But, that's why I'm asking, what is the real center of it all? What does it wholly stand upon?
Evidence?
Yeah, I mean, no, not just evidence, but what was the initial thing that started the study of evolution really and truly?
The observation of the diversity of life and an attempt to come up with an explanation for it. And the evidence continued to point in the direction that small changes over vast periods of time can account for the diversity of life on the planet. Right.
And, the thing about it is, do y'all guys believe in the Big Bang Theory?
Well, that's a weird phrasing, but I'll just say yes to save time.
And have you witnessed it?
No.
So
obviously.
Isn't that just accepting it without any...
No, because look, the evidence for a God, the evidence for God is like visions, and dreams and claims of divine visitation and things like that. The evidence for the Big Bang is like, carefully measured, carefully taken measurements of the natural forces in the real world.
Yeah,
the kind of evidence that supports it is completely different.
But what you're asking, and this is why I'm saying that you've fallen prey to creationist arguments. It's so typical. They're teaching little kids to go into their science classroom, and as soon as somebody starts talking about millions of years, the question they want them to ask is, "Were you there?" And that's exactly what you just did. And I'm going to, as nicely as possible, explain how absolutely asinine that is. You touched on it earlier in the, you only know who you weren't there. You have no evidence that your mother was there. And I said, yes, actually there is evidence. You can do DNA testing, and that is the confirmation. It doesn't matter if I was there. I didn't witness Jeffrey Dahmer kill a bunch of people, but that's the conclusion that the evidence leads to. So yes, I accept that in fact he did. I wasn't there when George Washington became the first president of the country, but the evidence leads me to conclude that that historical account is most probably accurate. And in the case of the Big Bang model, that is the result of a lot of math and thought that said, what is the explanation for the origins of the universe? And it's not like once we got the math somewhere we liked it, we just stuck with it. No, it was a model that made testable predictions, and then we went out and we did things like building the Hubble telescope and other instruments that allowed us to measure the microwave background radiation and confirm that the model was in fact accurate. I didn't have to be there to have sufficient evidence to believe that it is the best scientific explanation of origins. And what I find particularly amusing is that the creationists who want to ask, were you there? Most often they are particularly evangelical Christians. Were you there when Jesus was resurrected?
I wasn't there, but...
What evidence then do you have to believe that it actually happened?
And this is where theism is different from, I
yes,
guess, say,
it is, because you don't have evidence.
Where it's accepted by faith, but there are physical examples where you said that there are none, but that's not true.
You do, the difference between theism and science is that for things that we weren't present for, science relies on evidence to lead us to the best possible conclusions about what happened. And religion relies on something other than evidence. Why? Because they don't have evidence. Faith is the excuse people give when they have no good reason for their beliefs. If you had a good reason, you wouldn't need faith.
Right, but you said right that there's no physical evidence for creation, but that's not even true.
Yes, it is. Or you have the floor. Tell us what the evidence for creation is.
There are many of them, as I stated earlier, from excavation digs. There's also the account of the Ark. There's also Mount Sinai, which
account of the Ark?
I mean, they've found the Ark 40 times now, and none of them have actually found the Ark. And by the way, finding an old boat,
the Ark of the Covenant, which is in Israel's economy in terms of the sanctuary and all that.
Wow.
They found it in Indiana Jones, the first movie too.
This is not. I'm not even about the Indiana Jones. This is from studying it myself.
Yeah. No.
And there's
you really need to check. You really need to double check the. Excuse. I'm sorry.
Wait. Go ahead. Mount Sinai. What?
There's Mount Sinai, which the Bible says became smoke when God came into contact with it.
Okay. So what? What does the existence of Mount Sinai have to do with the truth of the Genesis account of creation?
What I'm saying is, you said that there's no biblical account there's no physical examples for creationism, but there.
What does Mount Sinai have to do with creationism?
No, I'm saying that the state of condition of Mount Sinai now relates to what happened when God came down upon Mount Sinai.
Okay, first of all, that is asinine, but what does it have to do with creationism?
What I'm trying to say is that if Mount Sinai is in this condition that it is now, based on what was said in the Bible, then it proves it to be true.
No. Wow. Okay, how did you demonstrate that Mount Sinai is in a state that is necessarily the result of God coming down to it? How did you prove that scientifically?
Okay, one, there have been shows done upon it.
A show's done.
Okay, documentaries.
Documentaries.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know for a fact, at least one of the documentaries, just getting back to the Ark, at least one of the documentaries about the discovery of Noah's Ark showed a piece of wood that was fabricated by a skeptic who was approached by filmmakers to make this thing. And what he did is he took a piece of railroad tie and various household ingredients, including teriyaki sauce, and he soaked this piece of wood in those things and then handed it over to the filmmakers, who were just not interested in where he got it or how he made it look like that. They were only interested that it looked good, and then they put it in their show and said, this is a piece of Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark.
I'm more interested.
And that skeptic got an award from the skeptical organization for pulling off that stunt.
But ignoring the Ark, I'm interested in this thing. You're saying that Mount Sinai is currently in a condition that can only be explained by God actually coming down to Mount Sinai. And you think that this is scientific?
Because listen,
No.
when things are burnt, they're left in a charred state.
Okay,
That is the
but
state
burning
that
does
Mount
not
Sinai.
prove God came down.
Because that is, how can you explain a mountaintop that big?
There we go.
Like that.
There we go. Now we are to the core reason that you have bought into every moronic claim that you've presented today. And the answer is one great big argument from ignorance. The mountain is in this state. How else can you explain it other than that God came down? That's a logical fallacy. It demonstrates that you have no basis for saying this. It is in no way scientific. You are basically saying the mountain's here. It looks like once upon a time it was smoky. That's consistent with the Genesis account. Nobody's got a better explanation. Therefore, that's what I'm going to believe. I can't begin to explain just how unscientific and dangerous that is. That is how we have come up with every wrong-headed, moronic, asinine belief that we've ever had. Oh, right. Lightning bolts, they must, can't think of a better explanation. This guy down the street says they must come from Zeus, therefore I'm going to believe that they come from Zeus. And it's, we did some investigation and we found out that we can direct them with, little rods. If we stand there and chant to Zeus, he'll strike us with lightning. I mean, it's that type of thing. You are saying Mount Sinai looks like it got burnt and therefore the biblical account is true. That is not following the evidence, that is leading the evidence. And when you follow that up with, can you come up with a better explanation? You have just committed one of the most painfully obvious logical fallacies of all time. It's an argument from ignorance, that because somebody doesn't have another explanation, therefore yours is viable. And I'm sorry, that's just not the way reality works.
Yeah, you still have to prove that the God actually came down and did that burning.
So even if it's from a biblical account, that's not good enough, right?
Correct.
Correct.
And you already know this, because do you accept the accounts of what happens in other religious books? Do you accept, claims about the Prophet Mohammad? Do you accept, the birth of Buddha? Do you accept any of those claims, the miracle claims from other competing religions around the world? They have no better or worse evidence than what you have for yours.
I mean, if that's what you want to believe, because we've gotten into
it's not.
It's not.
No, hold
okay.
on.
No, you hold on. This is not about what you want to believe. What you want to believe, as I've been trying to explain, is completely irrelevant. What I'd like to believe is true is completely irrelevant to what's actually true. And the difference between you and us is that we care whether our beliefs are true, and you care whether or not what you believe is what you want to believe.
Okay, here's the thing.
We really should move on.
Yeah, we're going to move on after this, so get your last shots in.
Okay, all right. My last point about it is that, early on you said in the show that it's not right to violate someone for their rights. And, I realized today that evolution has its sway. I'm in college right now. And evolution has its sway in basically almost every science there is. And, it seems unfair that creation had such a hard time finding its way. Creationism has such a hard time finding its way.
Astronomy's in all those schools too. Is it unfair that astrology doesn't have its way finding its way into the classroom? Is that unfair? Is it unfair that we have a bias toward truth? Is it unfair that we have a bias toward things that are scientifically demonstrable? Is it unfair that we discriminated against batshit crazy ideas that happen to be popular with somebody?
And Stephan, thanks very much for perverting the intent of something I said earlier in the show. I did talk about how a group that has internal behavioral rules should not expect that it has a right to impose those on people outside its group. But I was not talking about what they teach in college. You have a right. In order to properly apply what I said, you need to know what your rights actually are. You have a right to your beliefs. You have a right to your own beliefs. You do not have a right to your own facts. The facts are whatever it is can actually be verified in the real world. Okay, that's what the facts are. If you're finding evolution at every turn in college, it's because that's what the facts support. You have a right not to believe it, but you don't have a right to claim that just because something is written in your religion's holy book, that is magically a fact.
Okay, so, as I said earlier, Gentry is just a small number.
Yeah, one.
Those scientists who has supported it with his scientific evidence. And if they're, throughout time, we do have other scientists who keep studying and coming up with other things. And therefore, if they can present this...
Yes. The day that they present sufficient evidence for their claims, that's the day that they get taught in schools. That's the day that they are then justified you would be justified in believing them.
Right.
You believe them before then, you're just guessing.
Wow. All right. Well, that was a long call.
Yeah. And there's now all the lines are full and everybody's on hold, so let's see what we can get through. Dan in San Jose, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Pretty good. I'm an atheist, and I've been a long-time fan of the show. I do have a big bone to pick, though, with not specifically you guys, but atheists in general, the atheist community. I see there's a big problem in our approach to this whole discussion of theism and religion and whatnot. And so after I would like to explain what my complaint is, and then I would like to propose a solution to it.
Okay, go ahead.
First is that logic is, of course, a human conception. It's what we try to use to understand the world around us, and it's a predictive sort of construct that we like to pose to address reality and the way things should be and the way they shouldn't be, how we debunk someone's argument and whatnot. But the problem that both atheists and theists often have is that they fail to realize that this is all based on our perception, that they tend to believe their perception of the world is based on their logic rather than the other way around. So it's fine and well to point out logical contradictions in someone's arguments, but if you aren't going to ever address the perception that leads them to that sense of logic, I don't think we're going to get very far.
Logic is not predicated merely on our perceptions. The foundations of logic, the absolutes, are true irrespective of any mind or presence or ability to perceive them. That's how we identify fallacies with respect to validity. Fallacies with respect to soundness address the truth or falseness of the premises, and that is, of course, a matter of our ability to assess evidence from perception. But you're kind of making it sound like that it's kind of all up to how people want to look at the world, and that's simply not true.
Well, I don't mean to put it in that respect. I'm just trying to point out that when we produce a theory or a sort of explanation for the way things should be, it's typically based on our observations and the things that we can use to empirically examine the world around us, and the general things that kind of go along with that. But the thing I tend to find lacking is just that people don't tend to acknowledge that this whole discussion is based on the things that we use to examine the world around us. And so, I find that if you're going to basically, I find that atheists spend a lot of their time pointing out contradictions in theistic arguments, but they don't tend to spend any time trying to figure out why they contradict themselves. That, I mean, telling a Christian that there's a contradiction in their belief system is like telling an alcoholic that they have a beer in their hand.
No, it's not. You think most Christians, for example, know that they have logically flawed arguments and that they're just going to believe anyway?
No, I'm saying...
Then it's not like that.
No, right.
Because most alcoholics would know that they have a beer in their hand, wouldn't you say?
Well, I would say that some of them are in too deep to understand what you're even telling them. So half the time they don't understand what you're saying, and the other half of the time they don't care.
I'm going to try to find something that I agree with in what you've been saying, okay? If what you are saying is that these discussions that atheists have with theists should include more of an explanation of where the theist is getting his ideas from in the first place,
yes,
then sure. I mean, I think our last discussion, though, that went on for 45 minutes, got deeply into that territory. So maybe that's an example of the kind of thing you think we should be doing more of.
No, I think that there's an inherent paradox in the notion that an omnipotent being can demonstrate omnipotence and intelligence at the same time.
Okay, so what? You were saying that we need to be talking about...
what does that have to do with
that has nothing to do with what you were just saying. You were saying that we should be exploring where the theists are getting their core ideas from, what perceptions they're having that leads them to the conclusions that they reach, as well as looking at the logic.
I mean,
and we did that. So now what?
Curiously to me is that you seem to be presenting a logical paradox as what you think we need to be addressing after talking about not addressing you lost me.
Well, Well, for instance, I've watched several of your last episodes, and a lot of them were based on the topic of design. There's people perceive or people believe that they perceive the creation and the design of the universe and yada yada, and they're repeating their statements rather than having any substantive explanation for where they're getting their arguments from. And you ask them how they make the leap from saying that something appears to be designed to saying that it is designed.
Correct.
So the problem that I see is that the theists end up contradicting themselves because they don't realize that the notion that they can perceive this design is itself a perceptual paradox. That where I'm basically getting with this is that intelligence as a word, comes from the root words of enter and legere, meaning to choose between. It's a functional description of how we are able to accomplish things despite being not omnipotent. That for instance, when my basic explanation is that we base intelligence on an obstacle-goal relationship that operates at typically the subconscious level, so that which is why we intuitively put mice in mazes, because without limiting a mouse or providing a test, you can't see how much understanding they actually have. So you have to limit them to perceive their intelligence. So to perceive intelligence, something has to be limited. But they're arguing that God is not limited. So essentially, in saying that
Dan,
they can perceive...
Dan, I hate to be rude, couldn't possibly care less or agree less. And to define intelligence as saying it's a choice between things because we're not omnipotent, and therefore saying that it has a contradiction with omnipotence, is kind of, maybe there is a semantic paradox between intelligence and omnipotence. I don't know, but I also don't care, and I know that the only way to demonstrate it is to actually construct a logical syllogism and point out the fallacy there. So I don't know what the hell this has to do with what you first started talking about, nor do I know what it has to do with anything else, because I'm an atheist. I don't hold any theistic beliefs, and not all theists ascribe to this idea of omnipotence that you're talking about. So you're focused on one very little narrow thing and not being really clear about what your objection or improvement is.
Well, I'll submit that. trying to explain, because I'm not saying that it's not possible for something to be intelligent and omnipotent at the same time. I'm saying that it's not possible for someone to perceive as much. So what I'm saying is that
wow.
Could I just cut in? I really think, Dan, what you ought to do is write this up as in the form of a logical argument, and
or
send
even just
that,
an extended email.
Or right,
Yeah.
well, not too extended. And send that into, what is the email address?
TV@atheist-community.org.
And we'll take a look at it.
Well,
but this is just going round and round and not coming out anywhere. And we have to proceed with the show.
And while I don't give a damn what the chat room has to say, I'm sure they're going nuts at this point.
Okay, well, I do have a YouTube video series that I just completed.
I'm sure
So
you
perhaps
did.
that would
I'm
be-
sure you do, but I'm not going to let you pimp it until after I read your email and understand what you're talking about.
I understand. I'll send that in.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, thanks.
We got Stephen in Austin. Hey, we got a local call. Stephen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Good.
I just wanted to kind of get you guys' opinion on this whole ancient aliens theory. You know, we've seen now that there's evidence of atomic blasts in.
Whoa. There is?
Yes, there has been.
Okay, such as?
For instance,
You're talking about ancient atomic blasts, right?
yeah, ancient atomic blasts. Yeah.
Okay. Such as?
How ancient?
3,000 to 1,500 BC.
So that would be before World War II. Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Such as the incidents in the Indus Valley described in the Mahabharata at Mohenjo-Daro.
Okay, description is not evidence. I can read you descriptions of a Balrog from Lord of the Rings. Doesn't mean there ever was one. What's the evidence that there was an atomic blast?
They have proved vitrification of the rocks found in the Mohenjo-Daro site. They have found...
Whoa, what does that mean? Crude vitrification. What does that mean?
Vitrification is when you take a rock and you've superheated it. And the only way to get that level of heat into a rock like that would have to be through some sort of nuclear transfusion.
That's not true. I'd recommend you go get Phil Plate's book, his latest book about how the world will end. I forget the name of it. Does anybody remember that off the top of your head? Death from the Skies. One of the things he does, he goes through all the different ways that the world will likely end. But one of the things that we know, for example, with like the KT event and others, there are these huge impacts from meteorites, etc., that have the energy in the atmosphere of hundreds of thousands of nuclear weapons. So to say that a nuclear weapon is the only way that that type of heat could have been generated on Earth at any time in the prehistoric world is simply not true, since we already know of at least one event that generated more heat than that and potentially wiped out the dinosaurs. So we need something else for there to get from there was intense heat to therefore it was nuclear weapons, and then a step further to aliens. So how do you bridge those gaps?
Well, talk about radioactivity, which doesn't come from asteroid collisions.
Not true. I mean, and not only that, but you've got solar flare activity that produces devastating radioactivity, which could have happened countless times over the history of the planet. You need more to get to a nuclear weapon.
Okay.
I think an answer to your question, Stephen, is we don't buy it.
Yeah.
Well, I know you guys are big on saying that, the documentation through ancient texts are not a valid source, which I understand where you're coming from.
For some things.
Well, they talk about how people's hair and nails fall out, pottery broke without any apparent cause, birds turned white. There are certain things that people in that time could not have known that is the nuclear fallout that they had no idea.
So maybe it wasn't
nuclear.
So maybe it wasn't. You mean sure? They couldn't have known that. I agree. They couldn't have known that because I don't think they experienced any nuclear explosions. That they reported those other things.
They say that a single projectile charged with all the power in the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns,
and
swirling suns going around it. I mean, that's...
And?
Well, they explain all the side
take any
effects what
human
would
being,
happen after a nuclear explosion.
Take any human being...
No.
Dude, Take any human being, let their imagination run wild, and write some shit down. I mean, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, it's not like it's just some, off random person writing it down on a piece of paper, and this is the Mahabharata that it's been around for thousands of years.
So what? I'm sure there's somebody's laundry list that's been around for thousands of years.
I mean, saying something happened and then getting to determine what actually happened are two different things. And what you're doing is saying, okay, we've got heated rock and reports of something that sounds like the after effects of a nuclear blast, and then saying that here seems reasonable that there was. When we already know that there are alternate explanations for many of these, including reports of supernova stars, which would produce, intense light, coronal mass ejections from the sun, solar flares, things like that. Any of those things could account for any of those, and you're putting them together in at different times in different ways. At the end of the day, how much sense does it make that thousands of years ago, these ancient people who did not understand what was happening were being, bombarded by alien nukes? I mean, really?
Yeah, what was the motive?
Why would that happen? I mean, it doesn't pass the sniff test. Aliens came all the way across the galaxy, found Earth with a bunch of kind of like primitive cultures that were able to make pottery.
The theory doesn't say they came across us and just found us. The theory actually goes that, they took life here on Earth that was abundant in its many different varieties, gene spliced the actual, even maybe the apes, to create this.
We're really not buying it now.
And in addition to this, they blew up some nuclear weapons while they were doing this gene splicing.
Piling more crazy claims on top of it does not make it more believable.
Yeah,
that's a fundamental error.
Well, you can say that it's a crazy claim, and you can tell me that it's not viable all you want. But what if? Just put yourself in my shoes. What if it is true?
What if monkeys fly out of my butt?
How bad would that shake your foundation?
It doesn't matter. A claim is not more likely to be true, is not made more likely to be true by making it more extreme.
It wouldn't shake my foundation.
What matters is what's actually true. It doesn't matter how big a deal it would be if it was true. That's irrelevant.
It wouldn't shake my foundations at all because my foundations are on evidence. And if you prove that it was true based on evidence, it doesn't shake my foundations. It gives me a broader understanding of what is actually true.
There's been the evidence, but what about the ancient? What about the Nazca lines in Peru?
Keep going on.
The Nazca lines of Peru. Okay. Wow, you're done, Stephen. Sorry. I mean, I can't possibly waste an entire show with two calls about the most batshit crazy, ideas.
And you don't see the evidence even in our daily lives?
Of what?
Volcanic activity, global warming temperatures going up.
Evidence our daily lives of what?
Aliens?
The planet Nibiru and Nephilim coming our way.
Really?
No.
Please tell me you just called to mess with us.
Honestly, I don't buy into any of it either.
Well, then why did you do that?
I wanted to get your guys' opinion when unbiased.
I think we had that in the first 2 minutes, dude. All
right, look.
We think it's a lot of crap.
You heard a bunch of stuff that you don't really buy into, so you called to see if we bought into. You knew before you called that we weren't going to buy into this because you already realized there's not sufficient evidence. So you just kind of wasted a bunch of time. I mean, I don't need fake amusing calls. We can get amusing calls from real people. There are
we can actually be amusing ourselves if we
Yeah.
put our minds to it.
We got, is it Shilpa in Phoenix?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, we talked last week
Shilpa.
after the show.
I know. And, hey, by the way, Jeff, I did call once and say thank you to you about the hell, that you were giving people about hell.
He's giving them hell about hell.
Okay,
that
great.
was really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, because that helped me a lot with, dealing with that. But anyway, Matt, we had that long argument last time about, after the show. And
Yeah, did you determine I was right?
You said, you said a bunch of things. You called me immoral. You said I was a liar.
Uh-oh.
No, you're misrepresenting what happened afterwards. I said in those particular situations, that would have been my response.
I don't know, man. It's your word against hers.
I was just saying, kindness is better than truth, but obviously you don't believe that.
No, you're right. I do not believe that kindness is necessarily better than truth. I do not believe that. That doesn't make me opposed to kindness.
Well, I know.
Anyway, so what'd you have for today?
Well, I just wanted to ask you then, based on the things that you said, what do you really think should happen to religion? As an atheist, what do you feel that you want to see happen to religion?
You can go.
Me? She asked you.
Well, I know. But
I would like to see all religions looked at the way we look at the dead ones now. Mm-hmm. That I think Norse mythology is cool. I think ancient Egyptian mythology is cool. I think Greek and Roman mythology is cool. Mm-hmm. I'm fascinated by reading books about these crazy characters and their wild adventures and their amazing superpowers. I think that's fine. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
But, there's nothing wrong with, I've always said, there's nothing wrong with religion that wouldn't be equally wrong if somebody came out of watching The Terminator and start saying to themselves, boy, I wonder if there's evil robots from the future going to come after me. Fiction is fiction. It's a fine thing to look at and study, and that's great, as long as nobody's taking it seriously.
Yeah, it'd be really cool if in a couple thousand years, well, I realize to some extent it's already happening now, but people just went back to like the Christian mythology and created games to play with those characters. Although we already have
doing that.
Yeah, we have that now, but I mean, where that was the only real use for it. Yeah, people have a right to believe whatever they want. And the question, as it was written, was if it doesn't hinder progress. That's where we get into the sticky, because I see all false beliefs as hindrances to progress, just not all to the same extent.
Right.
You can believe something and be wrong about it, but it will hinder progress. They're not all going to have the same effect. And so I think that there are, right now, if you made a list of the world's religions, I couldn't rank them all in appropriate order, but I could definitely divide them up into categories as to which I think are most harmful to society on the whole, which I think are most harmful to individuals, which I think are the least harmful to any category, progress, societal health, whatever. I'd like to see them all go away, but I want them to go away for good reasons.
Well, what I find, like with religion, is when religious myths can be seen as myths and as fiction by religious people, and they use religion in terms of a social or cultural context due to tradition, because there are many societies around the world that are very traditional. But if they can see their myths for being myths, and they don't hinder science, they don't come into the area of politics, they don't come into the area of progress, because they realize these are things that... So it is a sort of dualistic mentality that they would have to have, but what would be so wrong with that,
What would be so wrong with it is that they are believing something is true when there's no good reason to think there's true.
But, she said that they recognize that they're myths.
Yeah.
But she called them religious people. If I'm assuming that, there are Christians who believe that the Genesis account is a myth,
yes,
but they still believe that there is a God and other things like that behind it. Now, and they don't necessarily let it affect their daily lives or, scientific progress. If you're talking about people like that, then yes, they're less harmful than the alternative, but they are still harmful to progress because they believe something that is not demonstrably true. And it doesn't matter if they recognize that there's a myth here. The problem is that they're looking at that myth and thinking that they're going to get some important knowledge or information out of it.
No.
That there is some being somewhere that has a message to convey to them. Now, if they've completely removed all, I just...
No, not what you're saying is that they would get some benefit out of it, but no, you said something else, but I think they can get some spiritual benefit out of it, meaning it makes them quieter or calmer to...
What is spiritual?
It makes them quieter or calmer people to subscribe to something that allows them to basically, like, it's sort of an escape, like going to a movie, like you were saying, the Terminator, or any sort of heroism, or
I don't even know what you mean by spiritual, but
like
going to the movie,
like just being quiet or being calm. I don't mean like spiritual in the religious sense. I mean, I hear spiritual used in other senses. Obviously, you don't like spiritual at all.
I hate the word. I despise it with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns. But Jeff wants to comment on it.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, there's people like Joseph Campbell.
Okay.
He studies mythology and is a proponent of this idea that the inspiration that we can get from mythology is valuable in its own right. Okay?
Right.
And I think what I would say is there would be nothing wrong with people turning to myths for inspiration any more than there's anything wrong with me turning to a Spider-Man comic book for inspiration.
Exactly.
But I wouldn't, if I turned to a Spider-Man comics for my inspiration, I wouldn't call myself a Spider-Man worshiper. I wouldn't say that I'm a religious person in the Spider-Man cult. I would say I'm a regular old person that is looking at, various things that I realize aren't actually true and finding some inspiration in them, right? I can't think of an example in the real world of anything I'd call a religion where its members are not people who actually believe that something underlying the myths ultimately is actually true, which is what Matt was talking about, right? So I think that's my response to your question is, wow, if that's all that people are using the mythology for, they're not religious. That's not religion.
Well, I mean, for example, I've known some people who are Quakers, like the non-traditional liberal variety of Quakers, and many of them are atheists. Some of them call themselves Christians, but their main focus is like on values. It's not on any myth, but they do have this idea of a light. Like, there's the light could be inside of you, not necessarily outside, but it's something good that's in all of us, and they concentrate on that. So I think that's like a beautiful sort of idea of spirituality, just something that makes you quieter and calmer and come together with other people.
I just want to make one more comment. What do we need all these quiet, calm people for? What is so great about being quiet and calm necessarily?
It sounds like you're taking this ill-defined word spiritual, and using it to promote a pacified populace.
Yeah, I think quiet and calmness is a fine thing in the right context.
And I think finding inspiration in things is fine. And I think poetry is fine. And finding some kind of poetic meaning or whatever. Those are all different. They all already have labels. What the hell does spiritual mean? Because you're saying they get a spiritual benefit. I still want to know. What does spiritual mean?
Well, spiritual benefit in sense, it just helps you to maybe develop your mind toward good values. It's the same as what atheists tend to do. It's not any different from any human being.
There's nothing I do that I would label spiritual, not only because I don't know what the hell the definition of the word is, but because I have words for the things that I do.
Yeah. What do you call them?
For what?
What do you call, trying to develop your mind towards better values or compassion or...
Reasoning, empathy.
That's reasoning?
Yeah, reason is what guides in my morals, among other things, but so does empathy. I'm still trying to figure out, people keep using this word spiritual, and I am completely convinced that it is a nonsense word that they use to try to find some middle ground between being religious and non-religious. I think it is a misuse of language to use this ill-defined term in the hopes that other people won't call you on it, and I'll call you on it. I want to know what it means.
And to the extent that you can use a word like that as a catch-all for a whole bunch of different things you might find nice, kindness and calm and wisdom and insight, those things, right?
Yeah.
I think as a catch-all term for those things, the term spiritual is inherently oversimplistic. I think those are all different things.
Yeah,
largely,
it's
they're very different things.
It's an exercise in laziness, and I think it is dishonest because many
But
times
see, there you go again. I mean, that's the same thing you said last
You
time.
bastard.
I'm being honest. It is laziness to use the term, and I think it's
But that's your
dishonest.
definition, Matt. That's your definition.
What?
That's your definition.
No, it's not my definition. I'm giving you my opinion.
Okay.
It is lazy to use that term, and it is also dishonest because generally when people use that term, they're talking about how they're achieving some greater insight or whatever. And you know what the true key to developing greater insight is? It's to actually investigate, define terms, and understand them, not lump everything together under one feel-good, ill-defined term. That is mud. That is not clarity. It is not, simplification is the hallmark of intelligence. And when you have this muddied term that doesn't mean anything, it's lazy. It says, I really don't want to think about this too hard. I really don't want to investigate this too hard. I really don't want to dig into why I think what I think. I just want to kind of go and enjoy it. Well, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to do that. But don't pretend like you're getting some sort of enlightenment out of it and then put a label on it that people could ooh and ah over. It drives me crazy.
No, it's not that sort of thing at all. I mean, spirituality is defined differently by different people. I mean, it's a term that people use often, but I can see where you're going with it. I can see how you say that in general, people who think like this are also like this, or are lazy, or
No, that's not what he was saying. He's saying it. Look, it's earlier I was pointing out. Calmness is one thing, right? Wisdom is a different thing. Insight is another thing. Right? Those are all different things. And what we're saying is that you're lumping them together under one term.
Yeah,
and you think you've accomplished something, and we're saying no. Talk about those individual things individually because they're different, and their differences matter.
And you can talk about how they interact with each other as well. But that's not what happens.
Which you can't do once you've labeled it all spirituality, and it's just this amorphous blob of various things that you think are nice.
Clarity is dependent on definitions and distinctness and simplicity. That's where clarity comes from. Clarity doesn't come from, ooh, this kind of all feels good, and I'm going to put this in it. I don't really understand it enough, so I'm going to call it spiritual. And that's where that word comes from.
But you're also assuming a little bit that the people who call themselves spiritual or think of spirituality in that sense are not using reason. You're assuming that they're not.
No, I'm not assuming that. I'm relaying this because every single time I ask somebody to define that term or talk about what they mean, they are unclear and unable to do so. That isn't clarity. That isn't insight.
It is a nebulous term, yeah, but, you know. Well,
I'm not assuming that anything about these people. I give them an opportunity. And it's across the board. Go do an internet search for spirituality. I don't find anything remotely appealing from anybody who's written on it.
And even Christians call themselves spiritual nowadays. So it's really I agree with
because
you on
it's
that.
in vogue.
But I still have a little bit of difficulty with you not seeing that people should be able to look at myths and derive for themselves how they want to use those myths, and
I have no problem with that.
Allow themselves a social or cultural context to practice.
No, that's fine.
I have no problem with that.
As long as they don't make the mistake of thinking that any of it is actually true.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then that's fine, right?
That's fine, except that your question was, you used the word religion to describe that, and our only disagreement with you on that point is we don't think that's religion.
Okay.
It's religion when you've got those myths, you turn to them for inspiration, and you think somewhere down in there in those stories, those stories are describing actual facts.
Maybe it's spirituality.
But it probably is, because this is probably spirituality on some level.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
It's nice. It's soft and cuddly. It's
and
relatively
we got like 2 minutes left.
You don't believe kindness is better than truth for sure, Matt, right?
What's that?
You still don't believe kindness is better than truth.
I don't believe that kindness
no.
is universally necessarily better than truth. I think there are situations where kindness is probably preferable to truth.
Yes.
But I am of the opinion that generally speaking, truth is better and preferable to kindness.
I'm even willing to go on the line and say under what circumstances kindness it takes over is better than truth.
Well, what I was...
if you don't mind,
Oh, go ahead.
I think the only circumstances in which kindness is more important than truth is when you're in a situation that's so extreme that it's too late for the truth to do any damn good.
And the two aren't mutually exclusive. I'd say that truth is a kindness.
It is.
Telling somebody the truth is a kindness, and the only time that I would not tell somebody a truth is when it is demonstrable that lying to them is more kind. And by the way, that means looking at the big picture, not an immediate benefit, but a broad benefit. I don't mind so much of the little lie about Santa to a kid, although I kind of go back and forth on it on different things. But telling somebody a lie to make them feel good momentarily without considering the ramifications of that lie further down the road, you've done them a gross disservice, and you've done yourself a gross disservice. And I don't mean you, Shilpa, I mean anybody. And
the world, human culture, disservice.
The better equipped everybody else is to deal with truth, the better off we all are. If everybody had been instilled with the ability to handle reality without needing people to lie to them on occasion, if we had built up that society, then we wouldn't be having this discussion, because truth would be the kindness.
I agree with you on that. But I do want to tell Jeff, Jeff, I don't know if you heard that after show call where I called in, and basically what I had said to Matt was that I had met an old man who had lost his dog, and this is when I was a Christian, and I was trying to tell him that Jesus loves him, and he was like, no, but will my dog be there in heaven though, and I did lie to him, and I told him yes, and
how do you know that was a lie?
Well, I mean,
did you know there was no heaven at all?
Matt called me a liar, so I'm just going along with what he said. So, but I justified it, even as a Christian, I justified it as there were two scriptures in the Bible that said that the Spirit goes back to God who gave it, and that's in, I think, Proverbs. And there was another one by Paul that said, for now we know in part and prophesy in part, so we don't know everything anyway. So those were my two justifications.
She rationalized, but she didn't believe that it was true, and she said it, and that's why I said she was lying.
Right.
So
the fairest answer you could have given.
And try you guys again. So.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't say she was a liar all the time. I said if she didn't believe it was true, she told him, she said something that she didn't believe was true.
If you ever lie, you're a liar all the time.
Oh yeah. What do you call somebody who tells the truth? I don't know. When I meet him, Ray, I'll let you know. We got Joe and Austin. You get the last call, and you got like 10 seconds. I'm sorry.
Quick comments. The State Board of Education has thinly veiled to re-indoctrinate the society.
I agree. And on that note, I apologize, but we are completely out of time. To anybody who didn't get through, please email tv@atheist-community.org. As a reminder, after the show's over, we'll be going to Threadgill's 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us there. Don't forget about the Back Cruise coming up in September. There's the crew who make this show happen and who work on Show yourselves. You have a camera. Woo, there they are.
Thanks, crew. You guys are awesome.
We'll be back again next week. We appreciate everybody for calling in, and sorry for those we didn't get to. Bye-bye.